Book 3, Chapter 52, Verse 17. The knowledge of the mountain ranges of Meru and others is included within the knowledge in the emptiness of the soul. There is no substance or solidity in them, just like a great city seen in a dream. The soul sees hundreds of mountain ranges and thousands of solid worlds, all drawn in the small compass of the mind. Like in its state of dreaming, multitudes of worlds are contained in a grain of the brain of the mind, just like the long leaves of the plantain tree are contained in one of its minute seeds. All three worlds are contained in an atom of consciousness, in the same manner as great cities are seen in a dream. Each of all the particles of consciousness within the mind has the representation of a world in it. Now this Leela, your stepmother, Arundhati, the wife of the hill Brahman Vasishta, has already gone to the world that contains the tomb of Padma before the spirit of Vidaratha could get there. The moment when Leela fell in a swoon in your presence, know her spirit was immediately conveyed to him and placed by his side. Leela asked, "Tell me, O goddess, how was this lady endowed with my form? How did she come to place as my stepmother beside my deceased husband, Prince Padma? Tell me in short, in what form do the people in Padma's house see her? And how are they now talking to her?" The goddess replied, "Leela, hear what I will tell you in brief answer to your question regarding the life and death of this Leela as an image of yourself. It is your husband Padma, in the person of Vidaratha, who beholds these illusions of the world spread before him in the same tomb. He fought this battle which you saw in his imagination, and this Leela who resembles you, Vidaratha's wife, was also a delusion. These, his men and enemies, were only illusions, and his ultimate death was as illusory as a phantom of the imagination. Like all other things in this world, it was his self-delusion that showed him this Leela as his wife. And it is the same deceit of a dream that deludes you to believe that you are his wife. It is merely a dream that makes both of you Leelas think yourself as his wives. In the same way he dreams that he is your husband. I also rely on my own existence. As I read this, I'm reminded of the sadhana technique of past life regression. In this technique, one takes a particular topic, a troublesome bit of karma affecting life today, and looks back through the vast inventory of dream lives that are there in the memory that is deep in the Manomaya Kosha. So we all have memories of our past lives in this colossal dream of the universe. So what is happening here is Saraswati is taking Leela on a past life regression, isn't she? So what is the value of the past life regression? Well, it allows you to broaden your perspective and helps you to see the illusion of all your lives. And when you see the illusion of a past life, it creates a connection between the karmic traces that form the energy patterns of that dream life and the karmic traces forming the energy patterns of this life. And when that connection is established, the energy patterns that created the energy patterns of this life are balanced. So it's a technique that we can use to explore the illusory universe and balance some of the karmic traces that are keeping us confined to a very narrow view of the universe. That's what the karmic traces do. They keep us confined to an extremely narrow view of the universe, which happens to be associated with time. If you think about a dream you may be having, a lucid dream, the value of time is quite distorted. In your dream, you may experience many days passing and have thoughts of something you're going to do tomorrow in that dream. Even make plans for how you're going to do what it is you're planning on doing tomorrow in the dream. While at the same time, you know this person is planning things that will be done in an illusory event that will never occur because I'm going to stop dreaming before this tomorrow ever comes. Time is just another dimension in the three-dimensional universe that we can transcend just by going into the lucid dream state. When we're in the lucid dream state, we may have a dream that, as we analyze it from this perspective of a lucid dreamer, we see that it is constructed of events and memories that we had in this life or in other lives. So the dream that we're creating is constructed of memories. Those are the building blocks of the dream. It is an imagination that goes on in our mind, but the imagination uses familiar memories as building blocks, doesn't it? Even when we use our imagination while we're meditating during samyama, we're imagining, for example, 1,000 individuals meditating together. Sahasra Sirsha Brahma. For the purpose of becoming the mind of the Creator. And so each one of us is going to have a slightly different imagination based on our own memories. Memories of what is the Creator? What would 1,000 meditators look like? How would it feel to be in a group of 1,000 meditators, all meditating together? We all have these slightly different concepts. When we put them all together, it results in an emergence of the mind of the Creator. So every day in our meditation, we're experiencing a little bit of time travel, traveling into the future to see what this group is going to be like. Verse 30. The world with all its beauty is said to be the image of a vision. When we know it to be merely a visionary scene, we must refrain from having any faith in the sights of this magic projection lantern. See, this is another reference to how the universe literally appears in the screen of the mind. Concept of a projection lantern. The first moving pictures were literally created with a lantern behind a magnifying glass, and the light would go through the magnifying glass, creating slight amplification of it, then projected into film, translucent film that had an image on it. That caused the image to be projected on a screen. Then there was a lot of technological advances until finally we have a modern movie theater with its projector in the back. But the principle remains the same. The light that's projecting through this film of individual karmic traces is Parama Jyoti Shakti. Every time we see something, every time we look with our eyes or hear something with our ears, we know on a deep level this is a projection of Paramajyoti Shakti through the film of karmic traces, divine or individual, that form this universe. The divine karmic traces that form this universe is the Creator's beautiful and perfect memory of Goloka. Individual karmic traces that are overlaid on the divine karmic traces, like scratches on the movie film, creating distortions and streaks and ugliness in many cases, come from individual karmic traces overlaid on the divine karmic traces. As we purify our awareness and our bodies of individual karmic traces, the world becomes more and more beautiful. We begin to make plans for creating a little piece of Goloka where we can live in one of our Goloka sanctuary communities. That's what they are. They are basically little pieces of the heaven on earth that's being created. Inside the communities, it'll be heaven on earth. Outside the communities at first, just about like it is now. But eventually, that's all going to merge, and what's inside the communities is going to be outside the community. Verse 31, thus this Leela, you and this king, Vidaratha, are only phantoms of your fantasy. So am I. Unless I believe to exist in the self-existent spirit. The belief of the existence of this king and his people and of ourselves as united in this place proceeds from the fullness of that consciousness which fills everything. Now we're getting a real clear look into how we live in this shared colossal dream we call the universe. When we are lost in samsara before Jivanmukti, before we are able to maintain a constant identity with the silent witness, then it is belief or memory of how things have evolved to this moment that create the continuity of existence. So we literally live on the edge of our memories. Whatever we remember from a minute ago is forming the basis of what we're experiencing at this moment. And when we step out of this lucid dream of the universe, observing it with our absolute senses, pratibhadarshasan, then it all takes on a different characteristic, doesn't it? It's like being in a movie theater and the movie is so engrossing that we begin feeling fear when the heroine or the hero falls from the airplane. And we want to scream as we're falling to our death. Then we realize, well, this is just a movie here. Wait a minute. I'm just sitting here in this movie theater. Changes everything. Verse 33. So this Queen Leela, also situated in this place with her youthful beauty and smiling so charmingly with her blooming face, is only an image of divine beauty. So now we see a literal comparison of a person with the source of that person, which is Krishna. We are all just little expressions of Krishna. See how gentle and graceful are her manners and how very sweet is her speech. Her voice is as sweet as the notes of the kokila nightingale, and her motions as slow as those of a lovelorn maiden. Behold, her eyelids are like the leaves of the blue lotus, and her swollen breasts are rounded like a pair of snowballs. Her form is as bright as liquid gold, and her lips are as red as the brace of ripe bimbo fruit. This is only a form of you, as you desire to be, to please your husband. It is the very figure of your own self that you now behold with wonder. After the death of your husband, Padma, his soul caught the same reflection of your image as you did desire to be hereafter, and which you now see in the person of the young Leela before you. Whenever the mind has a notion or sensation or fantasy of some material object, the abstract idea of its image is surely imprinted in the intellect. As the mind comes to perceive the unreality of material objects, it begins to entertain the ideas of their abstract entities within itself. It was Padma's thought of his sure death, his false conception of the transmigration of his soul in the body of Vidarata, and your desired form of a youthful Leela, the idol of his soul, that represented the youthful Leela to Padma. He saw you and you saw him according to your desires. Thus, both of you, although possessed of the same unvaried soul that pervades all space, are made to see one another according to your desires. The spirit of Brahma is all-pervasive. It manifests itself in various ways in all places. It is seen in different light according to the varying fantasies or tendencies of men, like ever-changing scenes appearing in visions and dreams. The omnipotent spirit displays its various powers in all places. These powers exert themselves everywhere, according to the strong force and capability it has infused in them. When this pair remained in their state of death-like lack of physical sense, they saw all these phantoms in their inner souls by virtue of their memories and desires, that such and such persons were their fathers and such their mothers before, and they lived in such places and had such properties and did such acts some time ago, are all memories of the soul, that they were joined together in marriage, and the multitudes they saw in their minds appeared to them as realities for the time in their imagination. This is an example that shows our physical sense perceptions to be no better than our dreams. It was in this deluded state of Leela's mind that she worshipped and prayed to me. You know, what we're doing is we're going behind the magician. We're going backstage and we're seeing how he does his magic trick. And then when we come around to the front of the theater where everyone else is sitting, we no longer see the magic, do we? We see, oh, there he goes, he's putting his hand in that little recess where the rabbit is. And now he's going to pull the rabbit out and everybody's going to go, oh, wow, how did you do that? But we already know. He put that rabbit in there 5 minutes before the show started. We know how the magic works. That's the value of doing this analysis. And the knowledge of how the magic works changes everything. Can't unsee something. Puts a new memory that rectifies the memory of the magic that we were previously seeing. What is that? That's the balancing of karmic traces. So this is an inside look as to how the Yoga Vasishtha is right now rectifying, balancing our imperfect knowledge constructs by giving us the antidote, showing us behind the scenes of the magic show. Verse 48, in order to confer the boon on her that she might not become a widow, and by virtue of my blessing, this girl died before her husband's death. I am the prodigy of Brahman, and the totality of that intelligence in which all beings participate. It is for this reason that she adored me as the guardian divinity of all living beings. And what is the purpose of this? Because we're all dealing with our ego. And the ego holds on to things that it believes is true. When we show the ego all this stuff, your body, your life, your memories, everything, it's all illusion. You are illusion. We're showing the ego. It's easier for the ego to let go of it. And in that letting go, the ego self-destructs and vanishes. And then we see the world as it is. A play, a lila of karmic traces going on without any input from us, as we are the silent witness, only observing. Like a collection of little robots, all running around with such precision. Their robotic speech sounds just like a human being speaking. Their activities are so smooth. The bodies don't look robotic at all. They look like real bodies. But we know now that each human being is literally acting out the programs of his or her individual karmic traces. Verse 50. In the end, her soul left her body through the orifice of her mouth and fled with her mind in the form of her vital body. And then, after the unconsciousness attendant upon her death was over, she understood in her consciousness that her individual soul was placed in the same empty space as the departed spirit of Padma. In her memory, she pictured herself in her youthful form, and she saw herself as in a dream, situated in the same tomb. She was like a blooming lotus with her beautiful countenance, and her face was as bright as the orb of the moon. Her eyes were large as those of an antelope, and she was attended by her graceful speech for the pleasure of her husband. Chapter 53. The second Leela visits the temple of dead King Padma. Representations of memory are not the creations of Brahman. Vashishta said, the second Leela, having obtained the blessing of the goddess, proceeded with her imagined body to meet her royal spouse in heaven beyond the sky. Having assumed her spiritual form, which was as light as air, she fled merrily like a bird and was blown aloft by the fond desire of joining her beloved Lord. She met a maiden sent by the goddess of wisdom, issuing out of the best model of her heart's desire. The maiden said, I am the daughter of your friend Saraswati. I welcome you, O beautiful lady, to this place. I have been waiting and expecting you here on your way through the sky. Leela said, lead me, O lotus-eyed maid, to the side of my husband, as the visit of the good and great never goes for nothing. Vashishta said. The maiden replied, come, let us go there. So saying, she stood before her, looking forward on her way. Then both proceeding together onward, they came to the doorway of heaven, which was as broad as the open palm of the hand and marked with lines, like those read in palmistry. They passed the region of the clouds and stepped over the currents of winds. Then, passing beyond the orbit of the sun, they reached the stations of the constellation. From there, they passed through regions of air and water to the worlds where gods and saints live. Then they crossed over the worlds of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva to the great circle of the universe. Their spiritual bodies, pierced through its openings like the humidity of ice water, passes out of the pores of a tight water jar. Leela's body was of the form of her mind, which was the nature of its own bent and tenor, and conceived these wanderings within itself. Having traversed the worlds of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and having crossed the limit of the manifest spheres and the environs of atmosphere, water, and air, they found an empty space, as spacious as the scope of the great consciousness, and impassable by the swift Garuda, even in millions of Kalpa ages. There, they saw an infinity of shapeless and nameless worlds scattered about like countless fruit in a great forest. They pierced through the circumference of one of these orbs before them and passed inside like a worm creeps inside a fruit that it has nibbled. This brought them back to the same worlds of Brahma, Indra, and others, to the orb of the globe below the starry skies. Here they saw the same country, the same city, and the same tomb as before. After entering the tomb, they sat beside the corpse of Padma covered under a heap of flowers. At this time, Leela lost sight of the heavenly maiden sent to accompany her, who had been her companion all this while and had now disappeared like a phantom of her illusion. Then she looked at the face of her husband, lying as a dead body in his bed, and recognized him as such by her right discretion. This must be my husband, she thought. Ah, my very husband, who fell fighting with Sindhu. Now he has arrived, has attained the seat of departure, he rose, where he rests in peace. By the grace of the goddess, I have arrived here in person, and reckon myself truly blessed to find my husband also as such. Then she took a beautiful fan in her hand and began to wave it over his body like the moon moves in the sky over the earth. The waking first, Leela asked, "Tell me, O goddess, in what manner did the king and his servants and handmaids speak to this lady, and what did they think her to be?" The goddess replied, "It was by our gift of wisdom to them that this lady, the king, and those servants found themselves to share in one and same intellectual soul in which they all existed. Every soul is a reflection of divine consciousness and is destined by its own fixed decree to represent individual souls to one another like refractions of the same. Or like shadows in a magic show. Thus, the king received his wife as his companion and queen, and his servants as related within himself. He saw the unity of his soul with theirs, with hers and theirs, and no distinction existed between any one of them. He was astonished to find that there was nothing distinct in them from what he had in himself. The waking first Leela said, "Why did not that Leela meet her husband in her own body according to her request and the boon that was granted to her?" The goddess replied, "It is not possible for unenlightened souls, such as that of the young Leela, to approach holy spirits in person. They are visible and accessible only to the deserving. They are unapproachable by gross bodies as sunlight is inaccessible by a shadow. So the established law from the beginning of creation is that intelligent souls can never join with dull beings and gross matter, as truth can never be mixed with falsehood. And so is that as long as a boy is prepossessed of his notion of a ghost. It is in vain to try to convince him of the falsehood of demons as mere shadows of his imagination. And as long as the feverish heat of ignorance rages within the soul, it is impossible for the coolness of the moon of intelligence to spread over it. So long also as one believes himself composed of a physical body, incapable of travel in the higher atmosphere, it is impossible to make him believe otherwise. By virtue of one's knowledge and discrimination, and by his own merit and divine blessing, one acquires a saintly form, with which he ascends to the higher regions, as you have done with this body of yours. As dry leaves of trees are burnt in no time by burning fire, so this physical body is quickly lost by one's assumption of his spiritual frame. The effect of a blessing or curse on anyone is nothing else than his obtaining the state he desired or feared to have.